Well, I would say it depends a lot on the context. So if I travel within Europe, I would say I'm Portuguese. But if I go abroad, like to Asia or to Africa or to America, I'll probably say I'm European. But I don't really think I identify as European more than I identify as Portuguese. So I would say I would identify first uh, as Portuguese and then as European, and it's highly dependent on the context. Well, when I was 17, I went to Germany and I lived there for a year, but I think it didn't shape. I mean, it was not an European formative moment because I just thought I was in a different country. It was also within Europe, but it was quite different from my country as it was, well, more north and everything. So I think, well, I'm not going to say that was a formative moment. I thought about it, but no, that wasn't. I think possibly my trip to Japan, when I went to Japan with a group of 40 other European people, and that was really the moment I felt I was European because I couldn't communicate with any Japanese because most of them don't speak English, and so I was feeling quite lost when I was walking around alone. Well, alone, I was not alone. I was with my some of my European colleagues, and that was very good because we had a sort of set of common references. We had a language in which we could communicate, either Spanish or English or French, and we all understood each other more or less. So I think that was probably the moment I felt that I was European, and that was different from a lot of other identities in the world. For example, the food. Well, I think when we arrived there, the first issue was the food. So I could I could eat with chopsticks, but some of the people couldn't even eat with chopsticks. So and also the flavors were quite different from what we were used to, and we started straight like to talk about and to compare this food with other kind of food we knew, which was mostly European food. I cannot say I cannot precisely describe it, but it was something we could talk about without even being from the same country, and also some references. For example, some TV programs we used to watch in our home countries, which were similar across the border. Or, for example, a lot of people there were from other countries within Europe, so Italian, French, or Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian, German. So there were a lot of references we could share with each other, and that and also because of the language, because we spoke the same language, and whenever we tried to communicate with Japanese people, it was always really hard, even because we were with two guides from the program, and even communicating with them, and they were English speakers, was different because I cannot say how. Well, of course, there's references like the food or the cultural references we have, the books, the TV shows, everything, but also some gestures and some non-verbal communication language that we shared that we couldn't use when talking with Japanese people. Of course, the Nazi German and the Holocaust and everything. Possibly also the Sovietization period that followed in Eastern European countries, and that's already, I don't know, 70, 60, 50 years old. And but most recently, I think the terrorist attacks that have been going on in Europe are really something that concerns people around here. Sorry. And mostly because they are quite random and you cannot predict them, and we don't really know how to address them. I think most of the nations don't know. And also, well, this terrorist issue and also the migrants issue, the migrants crisis that started, it's like 2014, 2015. Because it's something that goes a bit, I think, against what are the European values of welcoming people and welcoming and knowing how to welcome foreigners. And so we had a lot of people, we Europeans had a lot of people coming in, and we don't know how to deal with them. And I guess the European Union doesn't have a strong migration policy, so they don't really know yet how to deal with this amount of people, and they are just putting them into refugee camps, which are, I think, against what are the core European values of the human dignity and solidarity. But I guess it's a very difficult issue as well as terrorism. So I would say these two events in really recent European history are the most dramatic. I think I think they are all very terrible, but I think terrorist attacks are the ones that concern me most. Because of course they are the ones that I think I can be strongly affected by. Of course, I think the other ones are very concerning and alarming. But of course, this idea that uh, there are terrorist attacks that you cannot predict at all and that might happen everywhere, and you don't really know how to address them because you don't really know what causes them. And also the fact that they then increase the levels of intolerance, of when people don't trust foreigners, much of them anymore, because they think they're the cause of these terrorist attacks, which is a lie in most of the time. But then it gives space for this kind of rhetoric that these people coming to our country are terrorists, so we don't want them. And I think it has a double effect. So it's at on one hand, it's people have fear because they are totally unpredictable and they are usually very violent. And on the other hand, they promote fear among societies and promote this feeling that people cannot trust their governments to make them safe anymore. The best moment. Well, I think it was great that Portugal joined the European Union and also NATO, but that was long ago. But in recent European history, I would say the unification of Germany. Of course, I mean, I cannot explain it because well, there are for sure people that study it, and it's a really multi-causal process. There were a lot of factors involved, but I think it was important because it is a well, I would say one of the most powerful countries in Central Europe, and well, what is now called Central Europe, and the fact that it came together allowed for a more solid Europe and for Europe to expand eastwards, and of course for the European Union to expand eastwards and include a broader range of countries. And I think it was also great. I mean, of course, there are different opinions regarding that, but the Eastern European countries could get back a bit of their culture, a bit of their traditions, and join and Europe could be at least more, at least bigger, I would say, and more let's say coherent. How do you say that? Sorry.
Cohesive, I think.
Wait, that's it. Well, I think that's a tough one because most of the thing the EU does you cannot notice, and that's great because you have the European Union to care for you, but you don't really have to see it because nothing happened, and that's good. So possibly it allows for things that we cannot see or we cannot see directly. Of course, there are lots of infrastructure around there that if you look closely have like this European flag, they were financed by the European Union. I think, well, I could of course say these kind of things like well, I didn't participate in the Erasmus program, but I think this question always comes up. Yes, I could do Erasmus, and for example, I can travel without minding the borders, and it's very easy to travel around. Of course, that was something that the EU did for me directly, because I think it wouldn't be possible for me to travel as much as I did in the last years because of that. Also regarding, for example, European, in when you look for study programs in other European universities, you always have this prize for European studies. That's very good, but it's something that I'm not sure possibly existed before with bilateral agreements or something. I don't know, but I think it always comes to these kinds of answers. So I think most of the things the EU does for me, I cannot even notice it. Uh, it's just that I can continue to live my peaceful life, and worry about things that are not directly related with my survival. And well, yes, if I have to name just one thing, I think this idea of being able to travel without many complications. By 2030. Um, well, of course, well, since I named, I think two of them, these problems I mentioned regarding the Europe today, so terrorism and migrant crisis. Of course, I would like Europe to have a solution for those, or at least to have a great way to deal with that and an efficient way to deal with that. But I would say, well, apart from those, which come from following our previous questions, I would say I would like Europe to have, to develop a greater scientific hub. For example, to be able to compete in terms of high tech and high technology, and for example, have a hub or a network of really good science centers to work on topics, for example, related with the artificial intelligence, with technologies, with data science, and something that could compete actually with, for example, the ones that exist in the US and with China, and be able to attract a lot of people from outside Europe. I mean, people, possibly they are Europeans that are working abroad, and that could attract them to create in Europe a hub for high tech and highly developed science development. I think possibly it's related with more fundamental sciences, just like physics, chemistry, biology, everything.